In a small village, there was a famous chef named Lena. She was known for her delicious dishes and beautiful plates. Lena's kitchen was always filled with the yummy smells of fresh bread, roasting meats, and steaming vegetables. One day, Lena received a special order from the king himself. He asked her to prepare a meal for his birthday celebration. Lena was thrilled and started preparing the most delicious dishes she knew. She spent hours in the kitchen, making sure everything was perfect. She chopped the vegetables into tiny pieces, marinated the meat in special spices, and baked the most delicious cake in the village. Lena was so excited to serve the king her special meal. Lena worked tirelessly in her kitchen, making sure every dish was perfect. She made a juicy roast chicken, flavorful rice, and steaming hot vegetables. She even made a special dessert, a chocolate cake with creamy frosting. Finally, everything was ready. Lena carefully placed each dish on a beautiful plate and covered them with a silver lid. She called her servants to carry the dishes to the king's palace. As they carried the dishes away, Lena felt proud of her hard work. She couldn't wait to hear the king's feedback. The servants arrived at the palace and presented the dishes to the king. He was impressed by the beautiful presentation and the delicious aromas. The king tasted each dish and was thrilled by the flavors. He loved the juicy chicken, the flavorful rice, and the sweet chocolate cake. The king was so pleased that he asked his servants to bring Lena to the palace. He wanted to thank her personally for the delicious meal. Lena was nervous but excited to meet the king. She arrived at the palace and was greeted by the king himself. The king welcomed Lena with a warm smile. "Lena, my dear chef, you have outdone yourself," he said. "This meal is the best I have ever tasted. Your chicken is so juicy, your rice is so flavorful, and your cake is so sweet. You have made my birthday celebration truly special." Lena blushed with pride and thanked the king for his kind words. The king then asked Lena to become his personal chef, to cook for him every day. Lena was thrilled and accepted the offer. From that day on, Lena cooked for the king every day, and he loved every meal she made. But little did Lena know, something strange was about to happen. For the next few days, Lena cooked the most delicious meals for the king. He loved her cooking so much that he asked her to cook for him 3 times a day. Lena was happy to oblige, and she spent her days creating new and exciting dishes for the king. The king was so pleased with Lena's cooking that he started to gain weight. His advisors would joke that Lena's cooking was the best thing that had happened to the kingdom, but also the worst thing for the king's waistline. The king would laugh and say, "I don't care. I love Lena's cooking too much." But one day, just as everything seemed perfect, something strange happened. The king started to feel a little off. At first, he thought it was just a cold or a flu, but as the days went by, he started to feel worse and worse. The king tried to ignore his symptoms, but they only got worse. He felt weak and tired all the time, and his body ached all over. He couldn't even enjoy Lena's delicious cooking anymore, because everything tasted bitter and sour to him. The king's advisors were worried and called for the royal doctor. The doctor examined the king and took some blood samples, but he couldn't find anything wrong. The king was puzzled and frustrated. He didn't know what was happening to him, and he didn't know how to make it stop. One day, as he was sitting in his throne, feeling particularly miserable, he noticed something strange. One of his servants, a quiet and reserved man named Thomas, was always nearby, pouring his water, serving his food, and whispering in his ear. The king started to feel a sense of unease around Thomas, and he didn't know why. The king's unease around Thomas grew stronger every day. He couldn't explain why, but he felt like Thomas was watching him all the time, waiting for something to happen. The king tried to ignore it, but he couldn't shake off the feeling. One day, as he was eating his breakfast, he noticed Thomas pouring something into his tea. The king's heart skipped a beat as he watched Thomas stir the tea with a sly smile on his face. The king's mind raced with thoughts of poison and betrayal. He didn't know what to do, but he knew he had to be careful. He pretended to drink the tea, but secretly, he poured it into a nearby plant pot. Then, he called his guards and told them to keep an eye on Thomas. The king was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, but he didn't know where to start. He decided to investigate further, but he had to be careful not to arouse Thomas's suspicion. The king started to investigate Thomas's activities, secretly following him and asking questions about his past. He discovered that Thomas had been hired by one of the king's advisors, a man named Lord Victor, who had been acting strange lately. The king's suspicions grew, and he decided to confront Lord Victor. But, just as he was about to do so, he received a message from an unknown sender. The message read, "Be careful, Your Majesty. The poison is in the food, and Thomas is just a pawn in the game." The king was shocked and confused. Who was behind this plot, and how could he stop them? He decided to keep investigating, but he knew he had to be careful. His life was in danger, and he didn't know who to trust. The king was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. He called his most trusted advisor, Lord James, and told him everything. Lord James was shocked and promised to help the king investigate. Together, they discovered that Lord Victor had been working with a group of rebels who wanted to overthrow the king. They had been slowly poisoning the king's food, making it seem like he was just getting sick. But why? The king and Lord James decided to set a trap for Lord Victor and the rebels. They would pretend that the king was getting sicker and sicker and see who would make their move. The king was nervous but determined to catch the traitors and save his kingdom. The king and Lord James had thwarted the rebellion, but they knew that the traitors had been working with someone inside the palace. They launched a thorough investigation, searching for any clues that might lead them to the mole. Meanwhile, Lena, the chef, had noticed strange behavior from one of the kitchen staff, a quiet and reserved woman named Sophia. Lena reported her suspicions to the king, and he ordered Lord James to investigate Sophia. What they found shocked them all. Sophia, the quiet kitchen staff member, was actually a skilled assassin, hired by Lord Victor to poison the king's food. But she had a change of heart when she saw how kind and fair the king was to his subjects. She had been working secretly to undermine Lord Victor's plans, and she had been feeding information to Lena, who had been passing it on to the king. The king was amazed by Sophia's bravery and loyalty, and he asked her to join his team as a spy and advisor. Sophia accepted, and together, they hatched a plan to bring Lord Victor to justice once and for all. The king, Lord James, Lena, and Sophia worked together to gather evidence against Lord Victor. They discovered that he had been embezzling money from the kingdom and using it to fund his rebellion. They also found a secret letter from Lord Victor to his rebel followers, revealing his plan to overthrow the king and take the throne for himself. The king was shocked and outraged by Lord Victor's betrayal. He decided to confront him in a public trial, where everyone could see the evidence and hear the truth. The day of the trial arrived, and the palace was packed with people eager to see justice served. Lord Victor was brought in, surrounded by guards, and the trial began. The trial was intense, with the king's team presenting their evidence and Lord Victor trying to defend himself. But the evidence was too strong, and Lord Victor's lies were exposed. The king's advisers and the people of the kingdom were shocked by Lord Victor's treachery, and they demanded justice. The king sentenced Lord Victor to life in prison, and the crowd cheered. But just as the trial was ending, a commotion broke out outside the palace. A group of rebels, loyal to Lord Victor, had arrived, armed and dangerous. They tried to storm the palace, but the king's guards were ready for them. The rebels were defeated, and the kingdom was finally at peace. The king thanked his team, including Lena and Sophia, for their bravery and loyalty. With the rebellion crushed and Lord Victor in prison, the kingdom entered a new era of peace and prosperity. The king, grateful for the loyalty and bravery of his subjects, decided to reward them. He announced a grand celebration with feasts, games, and tournaments to be held in the capital city. Lena, the chef, was tasked with creating a magnificent banquet, and Sophia, the former assassin, was made the king's personal bodyguard. Lord James, the king's trusted advisor, was given a special place at the king's side. The celebration was a huge success, and the kingdom was filled with joy and laughter. But, amidst the happiness, a mysterious figure watched from the shadows, their eyes fixed on the king. The mysterious figure was a woman with long, dark hair and piercing green eyes. She was dressed in black, and her face was pale and gaunt. She watched the king with a fierce intensity, her eyes burning with a secret passion. The king, unaware of her gaze, enjoyed the celebration, laughing and dancing with his subjects. But Sophia, the king's bodyguard, noticed the woman lurking in the shadows. She sensed something dangerous about her and decided to investigate. Sophia approached the woman, her hand on the hilt of her sword, and asked her what she wanted. The woman's response sent chills down Sophia's spine. "I have come for the king," the woman replied, her voice low and husky. "He has something that belongs to me, something that was taken from me long ago." Sophia's grip on her sword tightened, her eyes locked on the woman's face. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. The woman's gaze never wavered, her eyes fixed on the king. "The throne," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "It was meant for me, but it was stolen by the king's ancestors. I have come to reclaim it." Sophia knew that the woman was dangerous, and she was determined to protect the king at all costs. Sophia drew her sword, ready to defend the king against this new threat. But, to her surprise, the woman didn't attack. Instead, she began to laugh, a cold, mirthless sound. "You think a sword can stop me?" she sneered. "I have powers beyond your imagination." And, with a flick of her wrist, the woman sent Sophia flying across the room, her sword clattering to the floor. The king, realizing his bodyguard was in danger, rushed to her side. But the woman's eyes never left his face, her gaze burning with an unnatural intensity. "You have something that belongs to me," she repeated, her voice dripping with malice. The king, standing tall, faced the woman. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to sound brave. But the woman just laughed again, her eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. "Don't play dumb, Your Majesty," she said. "I know you have it. The ancient artifact, the source of your power. It was stolen from my family centuries ago, and I have come to reclaim it." The king's eyes widened, realizing what she was talking about. The artifact, a powerful relic, was indeed hidden somewhere in the palace. But he would never reveal its location to this dangerous woman. The woman's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing the king's soul. "I know you're hiding it," she hissed. "And I will find it, no matter what it takes." She raised her hand, and the room began to shake. The king stumbled, his eyes fixed on the woman's hand, which was glowing with an otherworldly energy. Sophia, recovering from her earlier fall, rushed to the king's side, her sword at the ready. But the woman's powers were too strong. She sent Sophia flying again, and the king was left defenseless. The woman's eyes gleamed with triumph as she reached out to claim the artifact. Just as the woman's hand was about to grasp the artifact, a loud voice boomed from the shadows. "Not so fast." Lord James, the king's trusted advisor, emerged from the darkness, a small, glowing orb in his hand. The orb pulsed with a light that seemed to counteract the woman's dark energy. The woman snarled, her eyes flashing with anger, but Lord James stood firm. "You may have powers, but I have the power of the ancient ones on my side," he declared. The woman sneered, but Lord James could see the faintest glimmer of fear in her eyes. The king, taking advantage of the distraction, slipped away, determined to find a way to defeat the woman and save his kingdom. The king, Lord James, Sophia, and Lena joined forces to defeat the woman and save the kingdom. They discovered that the woman was a powerful sorceress, seeking to reclaim the artifact and use its power to rule the kingdom. The final battle was intense, with spells and swords clashing in a spectacular display. But, in the end, the king's team emerged victorious. The sorceress was defeated, and the artifact was safe. The kingdom celebrated, and the king thanked his loyal subjects for their bravery. Lord James was hailed as a hero, Sophia and Lena were rewarded for their valor, and the kingdom entered a new era of peace and prosperity. The king, grateful for the adventure, knew that he would always cherish the memory of the day he and his subjects saved the kingdom from darkness.